Today, I'm here at the Present Day Studios, Present Day Production Studios with Mark and James.
Hello.
I've had a little tour. Really, really exciting. We're here to talk about your mum monitors. But I want to go back a bit more and get a bit more background history on both of you and what you've created here as a space and recording studio.
Mark and I started working together 10 years ago and basically built a business as a traditional production studio. So we were doing rehearsals, recording, all the kind of the generic studio operation. And then we started to get into kind of touring and tour support because we had some experience in live sound as well. And that continued for many years. So we started working together in 2014. That continued for about 6 or 7 years. And then when COVID hit, obviously, we suddenly became very unbusy and thought, right, what can we do? We can't just sit around. Let's do something new, just try something with our newfound free time, and decided to start a YouTube channel, teaching people about what we already know about music production and sound and that kind of stuff. And it started to grow because we made quite a unique channel which integrated not only good, useful content, but a bit of humor. You know, it's not dry, it's not boring. So making it a bit unique, and that helped us to grow really fast. And then fast forward a few years, Dolby Atmos started to come into play in the music industry big time, and started to really get popular around 2022-ish. And we wanted to move into Dolby Atmos ourselves so we could start working in it. And at the time we were using an ATC SCM200 system, which is behind you now. That was next door. So we had that as our mains and thought, right, let's move into Atmos. And we spec'd it up, and the spec we wanted was about 150 grand. And we're like, shit. So we did what any nonsensical duo would do and thought, right, we can do that.
Yeah, make our own.
And so first of all started off designing speakers with the sole intention of using them as surround speakers. So keep the ATCs at the front and then use our ones everywhere else. But then you did a couple of experiments over time and found that with the mastering Mark was doing just in stereo, you were hearing things you'd never heard before, and the clients were also happier. They were saying, what have you changed? What's
every client was saying, have you got a new expensive piece of valve gear or something like that? These are the best masters you've ever done. And I was like, no, I'm actually doing less, but I'm hearing more, which really surprised me. But that didn't happen overnight, did it? I mean,
not at all.
35 iterations of cabinet, all of which sounded rubbish. We had ported designs that were knocking plants over in the room because of the hurricane coming off the back of them. And so there was a big, very steep learning curve. And over that summer, that was sort of July, August, September time, I'd just be here from 6 a.m. until midnight, sanding in the car park outside, and what the other thing I found, which was really annoying as well, is if I just made an MDF cabinet to test a new design, I would be very off-put by the fact that it was just a horrible-looking MDF cabinet screwed together. So I was sanding them and painting them and trying to get it to look sort of, half decent as well, because your eyes obviously influence your ears. So that was a long process of many, many, many very long days.
We say long, but actually it's quite surprising because when I look back at some of those videos, I think the whole duration has got to be about a year.
Yeah, so the first pen on paper design, when we thought to ourselves, right, let's look at making a speaker, because we knew nothing about manufacturing or any of that. We were a studio and a YouTube channel. So the first kind of glimpse into it was July 2022. And then it was about 6 months or so of hardcore research and testing and, breaking things and just lots of experimentation. And then we reached the first design that we were really happy with, which looks nothing like what we currently have at the moment, after about 6 months, and started to use them. We moved the ATCs into this room and started to use our speakers as mains, and just found that we were getting on with them really well. And then customers started coming in, not to buy speakers, but for their listening to their masters or whatever it might be, and saying, oh, I like these, can I have a pair? And then it kind of developed from that. First of all, the first kind of iteration was a tall, thin speaker, because they were designed as surround speakers. They were very tall, very thin against the wall, like 3 or 4 inches thick. And so they're not really suitable for most studios. So the first change was to make a speaker that is more speaker shaped, really, that would be more suitable for most studios. So that was the first kind of thing that we started working on before really selling any speakers. And then we ended up with the design we've got now, which is the Mum 8. So we started on the higher end of the market for speakers and had amazing feedback from everyone. So at the time of recording, we've got speakers in 23 countries already, in some various successful producers' studios as well. So one of whom is Phil Harding, who produced all of Kylie, Rick Astley, every 80s pop hit you could think of. He uses our speakers. So we've got lots of people that have an influence, if you like, who respect our speakers and really like their sound. And it's been a really fun growth, actually.
And it's always the first comment from everyone as well is, and you mentioned it this morning, is the level of detail. And people that have been working in, when you get someone like Phil Harding or someone that's been working in the industry for getting on for 50 years, and you play one of their tracks on your speakers and they go, oh, I've never heard that before. And it's like, well, you produced it. How could
It's true. When I was there this morning, I was really amazed at that the transparency, and oh wow, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that. When you start to think about it, going back to the philosophy of the whole idea of you're looking back at it. The whole idea of using better components, a lot of people that maybe they don't understand how manufacturing works. In a lot of, the manufacturers, their hands are tied because of the whole distribution system,
Yeah, sure.
The way the distribution system is set up. Now, tell me about what your thinking was. I mean, you said earlier on it started off, doing some stuff for your friends and people that were, coming in, listening to stuff, asking for. What was the thought process? As you kind of expanded, how did you think about what parts to use? And that's a lot of investment, first of all. And how did you delegate the workload between the two of yourselves?
Well, a lot of the choice of components came from reverse engineering a lot of speakers we already had in the building. And I was taking apart £8,000 pairs of speakers and finding that there was, a $17 tweeter in them. In a lot of the stuff where the manufacturers use OEM drivers or, they're not making, ATC are making their own drivers, everything's in-house. So, you get what you pay for with their products. But a lot of manufacturers' products were using really cheap stuff in really expensive speakers. There was one pair of speakers we reverse engineered that I won't say the name, but getting on for 20 grand a pair. And when you actually add up the retail cost of all the components, it was 1,500 quid. And I was like, so, okay, they're charging 18,500 quid for an MDF box, effectively. So what happens if we get the best components we can, not just in terms of, let's spend more money and not for any kind of bling reason, but just because, okay, a lot of these very expensive speakers have got very cheap components in them. What happens if we find the best bass driver we can, the best mid drivers, the best tweeters, the best amp solution? And so that's what we did, wasn't it? And it took a bit of experimentation to get a cohesive system, but we ended up with Bleesma, who are a German company who make the tweeters and the mid drivers, and they're perfectly suited to each other because they're made by and designed by the same guy. And Purified bass drivers, which are just, they've moved bass driver technology on into the 21st century, and some with something like 22 patents on their designs. Completely redesigned motor assemblies, how magnets work, the unusual looking rubber surround, all to minimise distortion and to try and get the speaker to disappear as much as you can. So as so it's like plugging an XLR into your ears rather than having the speakers in the way. And that's when things really jumped up to the next level, wasn't it?
Exactly.
And it's that transparency that was the goal. So with the Atmos system, our goal was, I don't want to hear a speaker. I don't ever want to go, oh, the guitar's coming out that speaker. If I put a guitar there or there or there or there, that's where I want to hear it. And that's what I think they've achieved with the design we've got now.
Feedback we get quite a lot when we demo the system next door to people is you can't tell where the speakers are if you shut your eyes. And so in our room next door, it changes quite a lot, but at the moment we've got 7.1.4, which is a Dolby Atmos standard, meaning 7 speakers around the ground level, one sub. We have got 3, but they're tied in as one mono source, and 4 on the ceiling. So you've got 3 at the front, 2 at the sides, 2 at the rears. So there's a bit of a gap between the front left and right, and the side speakers. If you pan along that wall, the sound will just move along that wall. Everything, it becomes almost a sphere of sound rather than there's a speaker there, there's a speaker there. Those are your only 2 panning choices. You can be completely flexible with where you put stuff because everything is not only transparent, but it's all time aligned as well, which is super important in the market we're aiming for, which is Dolby Atmos. Everything has to be time aligned so you get the sound reaching your ears at the same time from all the different sources. And it all adds up to give you a sound that comes from somewhere in the room, not necessarily from the speaker.
Yeah, you don't want to think in terms of channels with Atmos, so you don't want to think left, centre, right, rears. You just want to think sphere of audio. I want to put something at that point in space, not only spherically, but also in and out as well. And we had Dolby out last week who calibrated the room to their specs, and that's just taking it up to the next level. We were using Trinov as a calibration tool. To be totally honest, I think Dolby have exceeded what the Trinov's capable of. If I bypass the Trinov, it just all sounds a bit more alive and 3-dimensional somehow now, which is bonkers. But yeah, so that's really taking it up to the next level as well. And I had great fun just experimenting with a sample of a bee, because we're all used to the sound of it. It's like, what better we're all used to the sound of a bee. And I remember going to one of the first 3D IMAX cinemas back in the 90s probably, and they actually had a film of a bee, and that's kind of what inspired. And at one point it's there, and you're like, oh. So I just got a sample of a bee and just panned it around the room, and it just sounds like there's a bee in the room. You don't hear it go from left to rear, so there's just a bee in the room, which is great fun. And that's my latest album. I'm going to be as track 1. We'll have a wasp.
So how did you delegate the workload? Because I know that you're doing a lot of the hardware stuff. Because as I was coming in, you were working on something.
There are 2. We are a really good team, right? So there's 2 of us in the business. We are very different people, and that makes us a good team. So I'm really good at anything with ones and zeros. If you give me a computer or ask me to design something in CAD or whatever,
you're the nerd.
I'm the nerd.
Yeah.
If you give me a screwdriver, I'll poke myself in the eye with it. I'm an idiot. If you give Mark a computer, he might be slow with it, but give him a screwdriver or anything to build amps or anything like that, you'd do a much better job than I would.
You're an old school engineer.
Yeah, well, it's not just being slow with it. If when I walk in this room and you're editing a video, it crashes. I'm one of those people.
Mark has an aura of anti-technology.
Some sort of electromagnetic field that just destroys electronics.
Mark has a track record with tech.
Yeah, fortunately our amps are in metal casings, and that seems to shield it out. But
he's got lead-lined pants on. So
I think that's an age thing as well. The amount of times you'll hear me screaming in there, and you'll come in and I'm just trying to check an email or something like that.
Yeah. So we're a good team because we're good at different things.
The thing is, there's also an age gap that's quite unusual because not only, in terms of personalities you're different, but that age gap, that complements one another with what you guys got. But something else that's unusual is the model that you've chosen on how to sell and distribute these monitors. So talk us through that a bit.
Well, it came from looking at a 20 grand pair of speakers that have got 1,500 quid's worth of components in it. It's like, where is that money? It's not just an MDF box. Where is that money going? So there's some to recoup the R&D that went into designing the speakers. But it turns out that most of it is going to distribution and retail. And if let's make up a music shop that are based in Watford, 20 years ago, that shop would have had a branch in Watford, a branch in Liverpool, Manchester. They'd have had 30 branches all over the country. Then the internet came along. Now they haven't. They've just got a branch in Watford. So if Dave in Liverpool wants to hear a pair of our speakers, he's got to go to Watford. And if he's going to Watford, he might as well come here. So the first thing was, how can we get the price down for the customers? Because a pair of standard Mum 8 should be somewhere between 10 and 12 grand if we were going through those regular distribution channels. But we didn't really see the value of those traditional channels and still don't, unless they've got shops all over the country and they're putting marketing budget into to market the product, which most of them aren't. They're just taking boxes in, shipping boxes out, and taking 70%. So it's like, well, that's ridiculous.
There's no value. What are they adding?
No, yeah, they're not adding anything.
And also, another thing that really works in our favour is, rather than following the step which most natural companies would, in which you make a product and then you find your audience, we were in a fortunate position where COVID wiped out all our business. We then started the YouTube channel, grew an audience for 4 years, or 2 years at the time of making the speakers, 4 years now. And so we had an audience to start with. And so we didn't need that huge marketing budget, which would have been implemented into the price of the speakers and all that, because we have 46,000 subscribers. We've had 4 million views on the channel. We've got a huge amount of people that watch us and listen to what we say. And so we could use that to think, right, how can we improve what's available on the market for speakers and say, we think you should listen to this, you know.
And then there's two benefits for the end user as well. One is they're saving a fortune. It's literally costing them half the price it should be. And the other benefit is that they're dealing directly with us. And we really pride ourselves on customer service, because most of our customers have become friends. So we can name every single customer we've got, which, you know, another big company selling it, because it's a big ticket product at the end of the day. We're not shipping thousands of pairs a year.
How much are they?
The base model's 5,995, so 6,000 in the UK, including VAT, and then you can have a Brilliant upgrade, which takes it up to the next level, which is
obviously, if we're talking in Atmos, that's considerably cheaper than some of your competitors.
Yeah, I mean, we worked it out. It's about 30 grand with subs for a 714 Atmos system. And you know, when I was mastering with these, it was 30 grand for a stereo pair. So that can be a considerable saving. But the customers are dealing directly with us. They're not having to go through an anonymous call centre or go through a retailer first. If they've got a problem, they phone us and they will speak to one of us, and we'll sort it out straight away. And we haven't had any. Again, that's another thing about using high end components, is that we haven't had a single issue with a speaker yet in the field. We haven't had an amp go down. We haven't had a driver blow. We've had no warranty issues whatsoever. And there is a 3-year warranty, by the way, just like that. But yeah, so the customer's saving a lot of money, and they're dealing with the guys that are making them, and it's us too.
And testament to your, I suppose, commitment to your product and the support that you give. I'm hearing that you've gone up to places like Scotland and hand delivered.
Yeah, so anywhere. So we do sell worldwide because we have that reach thanks to YouTube. But yeah, anywhere. I'm not driving to Greece, but if anywhere in the UK, anywhere on like the British Isles, we will drive there and deliver them. So I drove a pair to Edinburgh last year, Northumberland. We've been to kind of the West Country as well. So anywhere in the UK, really, it just makes sense, because it would cost us the same in petrol as it would to get DHL to drive them there. So why not? It would be a day out of our time to go and install them to the customer. You get to meet the customer, which means a lot to them as well as us.
It must make a massive impact on the customer.
Yeah, because you've got the person that designed the speaker coming in and tuning them to your room, which normally is a paid thing. We just do it because we can travel around the country easily.
It's your passion, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
We learn a lot from every installation we do as well. We learn how they work in various different rooms. We've had them in completely untreated rooms, very well treated rooms, big rooms, small rooms,
cupboards,
and so we're learning. So like Anthony's room, we walked into Anthony's room, we fired them up, we fired up the test tracks, no measurements, nothing, just fired up the test tracks, and it's like, yeah, there's a massive 60 hertz boost at the listening position due to the room. So you knocked 60 hertz out by about 3 dB, and that fixed it straight away. And and then you can measure it and fine tune it.
And talking about measurements and stuff like that, so there's a popular piece of calibration hardware in audio called Trinov. So Trinov is a French company that do real high-end multi-speaker calibration. And because we've not got that added margin for retail distribution, blah, 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 if you were to try and spec a speaker using our speakers for 10 grand, you could have the speaker plus a Trinov system to calibrate them, which is another 4 grand. Whereas if you were to go through a traditional selling route, that would be 14 grand. So really, you can have a fully calibrated high-end speaker system for the same price as what our competition might be selling. So there were so many different benefits to doing it our way. And again, with visiting people's studios, I can then take that box, install it for them, set it up, done. And you get a happy customer.
And what about your competition? Have they listened and heard and had anything to say about?
So we've had, I won't name names again, but we've had the technical director of a very high-end speaker brand come in and say, he really put them through their paces, didn't he? He tested everything, really kind of pushed them, listened to them loud, quiet, all the things you'd do, and was very impressed. He was super impressed with what we'd achieved, considering we were a new company as well.
The competition's a funny word because we're not really competing. Well, we are obviously because it's a pair of speakers, but
the difference is we're friendly with these people.
We don't really see it as competition, and because it's such a different business model, we're making very much, that we haven't got pairs on the shelf ready to go. We're hoping to get that way with the smaller one, the Mum 6, so we can get them out within 24 hours. But they're expensive for us to make, so it's a very bespoke product, and people can choose a colour. They can have their custom logo on the screen, so it's very much tailored to the customer. And Adam can't do that because they're shipping thousands of pairs a year.
And their accountant is probably saying
the accountants are in charge. That's the problem with a lot of the bigger companies. So it's not really competition, is it? But what I want to do is, and we've talked about this with a few manufacturers, and initially they thought I was mental, but now a lot of them are starting to think, no, actually, that's probably a pretty good idea. I want to be a dealer for other brands, so I'd like to be a dealer for PSI, ATC, PMC. Why have they all got 3 letters? I don't know.
PDP.
Because people, it's a subjective thing as well. People I love ATC speakers. I always have. They're absolutely amazing. Okay, I prefer ours now because we've got them up to the next level. But I still love ATC. I've got a bad word to say about them. Never will have. They for the 40 years they've made incredible top-notch stuff. All their own drivers. Really good. I'd like to be an ATC dealer because there will be someone that will listen to a Mum 8 and they might prefer an SCM50. And if they do prefer an SCM50, then I'd like them to be buying them from us rather than having to send them to another retailer, because then we can offer that same kind of level of support. And then the competition really does dissolve away, because if they do prefer another brand, PMC, whatever it might be, then we're taking care of them as well. And that, I guess that kind of shows a confidence in our product as well. I'm quite happy to put ours in a room with pretty much anything else out there.
And that has been kind of proven as well with some customers. So there have been some that have already had high-end brands of monitoring and they've replaced those with ours. So we're confident in their performance, but like you said, it's a friendly competition.
One of them's done it twice in both his rooms as well, which is it's like, okay.
So basically, I think we've achieved what we wanted to achieve, which was creating a high-end monitor that's more affordable, just by looking at it at a wider scale and thinking, right, what can we change here in the selling process and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm confident in how they sound. I'm confident in how they perform. Sound on Sound, we had a review by them last month, and you just got to read it really. It says fantastic imaging, fantastic detail, blah blah blah, phenomenal bass. All the kind of things you want to read. And there was actually, in all fairness, there was one thing that we could improve on in that review. So they have like a pros and cons thing. There was only one con, and that was tonal balance needs tweaking. And the good thing is, because we've created a modularly upgradable speaker with DSP, it can be done remotely. So when it comes to us fixing that problem, which I'm not sure if it is a real problem, we've never had a complaint about tonality from any customers.
A lot of that's subjective, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a simple case of, right, you guys have all got digitally controlled speakers. Get a USB cable, get your computer, plug them in, I'll update your speakers. It won't cost you anything. There you go. You've got a better pair of speakers. So they're future-proof as well.
That was the other thing. That's what the Mum stands for. It's modular upgradable monitor. So people can upgrade from Silk, mid-drivers and tweeters to beryllium.
So you weren't trying to take the piss out of my mum?
Yeah, no. Well, there's been lots of Mum jokes
of course.
over the past year or so. Most of them have been unreadable and were mine. Yeah, so that was the kind of idea as well, because I've been through so many pairs of speakers over the years, and what we didn't want to do with the Atmos thing was crap out and spend $2,000 on a budget surround solution and then have to upgrade it over time and sell those, and then so that's why we came up with the idea of having well, why can't we come up with a two-way that later on you could turn into a three-way? That's how it kind of started, and then it was like, okay, well, why can't we instead of having a traditional plate amp in the back, if someone wants to soffit mount them, that's really difficult. You've got to take the plate out and put it somewhere, and there's live mains on the back. Let's put it in a shallow rack case that can bolt onto the back of the speaker, or you can take it off and put it in a rack. And then
that's an actual genius move.
It's just a practical thing. And then when amp technology does improve, so in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, there's going to be better DSP, there's going to be better Class D, because that's just how the world works. There might be calibration built into that as well. We can upgrade any customer that wants an amp upgrade. All they've got to do is take that amp off the back, put the new one on. There you go. You got the latest technology without having to stick it on reverb or whatever.
So when I saw that, I thought, wow, and I think that's one of those things that, how did you get the idea for doing that?
A lot of that came from our customers. A lot of the feedback was from, and that's the great thing about working directly with the customer and not going through the usual supply chain as well. And that was Lars in Hamburg, wasn't it? I wanted to put them in the wall. Is there a way we could? And he said, "Oh, the amp's going to overheat." And I said, "Well, no, they're probably not going to overheat, but it's going to make them a right pain in the ass to just turn on and off." And if you want to change something, if you want to change a digital input, and then we came up with the remote with the screen on the front, so you can power them on and off and change inputs, etc., and even volume from the remote. But then I thought, well, someone with an Atmos system, you really want all the amps in a server rack, in a machine room with your other stuff, with your converters and everything else. So it just seems to make sense to, rather than offer the rack mount amp as an option and then have to have two different models of speaker, one with a rack mount amp and one with a plate amp, just make the plate amp not a plate amp, just make it a shallow amplifier on the back that you can just take off and put in a normal rack, which took some thinking about in terms of how do we engineer that. And the answer is standard NL8 nitric connectors that are used the world over, that you can get anywhere in the world easily. So there's no sort of bespoke cabling to it. That's something that the customer can get themselves.
Again, I think like the best way to coin it, you're a perfect example of a for us, by us sort of methodology around the way that you design, way that you take input in from product design and feedback from your customer base and apply it to your products. How do you think that's going to evolve now? Have you got we've talked off camera a bit, but what have you got in the pipeline?
Well, I mean, we're happy to share what we're working on, so we don't really do like NDAs or any of that stuff because we're a YouTube channel, really. Like, we like sharing things. So we've got models of speakers in the works already. So we've got the Mum 6 two-way already out and selling. Mum 8, which you've heard, that's the three-way. We've got the Mum 10, which we're working on, which will just be a bigger version of that. Possibly a few little changes. We're still designing that at the moment. But very similar philosophy to that. It's got the Bleesma mid and tweeter, a bigger 10-inch Purify woofer, probably a rack mount only amp. We're still kind of deciding, but it will just be a bigger, kind of fatter version of the Mum 8.
A fat mum.
A fat mum. Your mum is fat.
That's it.
We've got some subs as well that we're working on. So that will be, again, we've been through many iterations because there's many ways to design a speaker. You can have a sealed cabinet, ported, transmission line, passive radiator. It's choosing the right option, and that's all part of the design process. As Mark said, we started off with ported cabinets for the mums, ended up going sealed for various reasons. With the subs, we'll probably end up going passive radiator because it means you can get a super powerful, low end with lots of energy, very, very low reach. I think the 8-inch passive radiator one goes to about 14 hertz. So there's tons and tons of headroom. So there's lots of things we're designing and working on.
The main thing will be the upgrade to the Mum 6. So the Mum 6 is the little two-way with a 6.5-inch bass driver and a 1-inch tweeter. We're doing one of the big questions again, this has come from our customers. One of the big questions we get from our customers is, what stands should I buy? And we looked into making stands, and we can't make stands cheaper than stand manufacturers can. So it's like, okay, let's not even go there. Just something that doesn't move, and get them off the desk, and any stands are better than, pile of concrete blocks, whatever. So then we thought, well, and the other thing people wanted was subs. So it's like, okay, well, why don't we make subs that are stands? That seems to make sense, because then you've got all the drivers are in a line. It's easier to get a cohesive wavefront. If you want to keep your speakers on stands, 2 subs are better than 1, because you can, if you've got a fairly symmetrical room, you can position the subs to cancel out certain room modes as well. So that seemed to make sense. And then just looking at the sort of design we came up on paper, I just thought, well, there's a 2-way on top at the moment, but with the sub, which isn't really a sub, it's more of a base extender than a sub, there's no reason why that can't become a 3-way. So existing Mum6 users will be able to buy the extension cabinets, put their Mum6s on top. We will offer an option to ship I'll call them subs, even though they're not, because it's an easier word to remember. We'll offer the option to ship those without a bass driver in. So basically you can take the bass driver out of the 6, pop it in the sub, and then you can put one of our mid drivers in the hole there. And that effectively gives you a Mum 6.5 or a Mum 7.
Yeah, I don't know
something
what
in between the 6 and the 8.
Mum 6 plus.
Yeah, so you've
Apple.
upgraded to a proper full 3-way, but started off with a smaller, cheaper 2-way.
So again, following in the thing of modular, upgradable monitor in every sense.
Going back to your YouTube channel, I mean, I remember when I first saw you guys, you were doing a lot of reviews, also explaining about the technicalities of what you're doing. How have you found, that kind of transition and that balance between being seen as objective, doing reviews of other products, and now you're a manufacturer? How do you kind of balance all of that?
So, firstly, obviously, since we've been making the speakers, the YouTube content has slowed down slightly because we've been so busy doing that. But we're looking to start speeding it up again. But excluding that fact, we were doing lots of reviews of speakers, microphones, interfaces, whatever it might be. Speakers in particular is a tough one now because we make our own. Although people do know that we are unbiased and will always just say it how it is, people that don't know us would not expect that, and so it would probably come across as a bit biased if we were to review a speaker, especially if it ended up being a negative review, which rarely happens, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So I think maybe in terms of speaker reviews, that might be a bit of a grey area now that we probably can't do so much. But
it would be like Audient reviewing a Focusrite interface.
Yeah,
on
it would be a
YouTube
bit
channel.
weird.
It would be a bit weird.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is, if anyone asks me personally for my opinion on something, I'll tell them, I think that speaker's great. I think they could improve that, whatever. But in terms of like an actual review video, it might be a bit of a grey area that we probably would avoid just in terms of conflict of interest.
Yeah, I think we can do it with lower, sort of more budget solutions like we have already with things like the Callies and the A series. I
think it would make sense to do that with products where really it would be a very night and day choice as to which one you'd pick depending on a budget. If you've got $6,000, you're not going to spend £100 on a speaker. You're probably going to spend $6,000 on a speaker. Whereas that would make sense because we're not competing against those guys.
But if you've got $12,000. Don't spend $12,000, spend $6,000 with us.
There we go.
Yeah. The more expensive wedding is not always the better option.
Well, the thing is, it's like you can't really argue. Certainly around, I bet the majority of the designers that are working for a lot of these other manufacturers, especially speaker manufacturers, are wishing that they weren't confounded, like having their hands tied by, pricing and costs and things like that. And that's the way that you've approached it. You've approached it in the right way. You are engineers, you're mixing engineers in particular, and you wanted something for that solution. I think what you guys have done is amazing. But the way that you've actually executed it and the time that it's taken, hats off to you guys, because I've been through that process myself and I know how long it takes, but you guys have been so involved, and you were saying you're doing 12-hour days, and you were saying earlier on you're not getting a lot of time off, but that's what it takes, the level of dedication and passion.
We're always of the opinion if you're going to do something, you might as well do it properly. And so if that means being here 7 days a week in order to design stuff or make speakers for customers or whatever it might be, that's what you've got to do.
And it comes from there as well.
Exactly.
Doesn't it? Going and installing a pair of speakers in someone's house in Manchester is a day off, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a day trip.
And if I do try and have a day off and do something else, I just want to get straight back in here or go and install a pair of speakers for someone. So
how does that feel then when you leave? So you've done all the work, and then you put your work out for scrutiny. How does that feel?
I must admit, obviously, because again, we are new to this in relative terms. We've only been doing it for a year and a half or so. When the first pairs of speakers ever went out, like serial number 1 and 2, that was terrifying. I'm not going to lie, it was terrifying because no one's heard these speakers. And funnily enough, the first person that ever bought a pair, and thus the first person that received a pair, was in Canada. So he'd never even heard them. He bought them purely on the trust of our brand that we'd established over the last few years. And
then told us rather a deep, dark secret after he'd received them. And fortunately, he told us this after he'd received them, and that was...
Yeah, so he basically received the speakers, spent a bit of time with them, told us he loved them, and then he was like, oh, by the way, I've been designing speakers for 60 years. Here's my feedback.
We like, okay.
I would have been even more terrified, I think, if I knew that beforehand.
Imagine that. He played that well. Well done, Jeff.
But yeah, so we've had wonderful feedback, and as I just said, a lot of our customers have not actually heard them. They're buying them based on trust that we've established within the brand over the last few years. And obviously, there is feedback from existing customers that people can read and look at. There's a Sound on Sound review. There's just been another YouTube review that's gone up for our Mum 6, the little two-way. So that's growing, and it will become even easier for people to make that decision to buy with us.
And also our existing customers are becoming our retailers as well. So we've got people in LA doing demos, we've got people in Slovakia doing demos, and having people to their studios. And there's lots of sort of unexpected consequences from that. There's one guy in LA who's already been introduced to one of his heroes in terms of production because he saw our speakers somewhere and then got in touch with us and said, is there anywhere in California, anyone in California with the speakers? And we hooked him up, and it turns out to be, a producer, this guy's one of his idols. So he's now got, and they're now working together on projects. So that's a sort of unintended bonus. But yeah, our customers are becoming our retailers as well, which is great. And we pay a commission if you sell a pair of speakers.
And you got a networking side to your web YouTube side as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, introducing people to each other.
So that whole process. So when you went through the process of doing that, is that giving you more of a, I suppose, appreciation of what some of these manufacturers have to go to in terms of picking the right components for the for the things and the whole what's amazing for me is the speed in which you've done it, because usually it's, no matter what you do, it just takes a lot of time, not only to be able to go out and source the products, but test the products, and also you're literally changing and evolving as you're testing them.
So what we've got here, as Mark said, we did like 30 odd iterations of the Mum 8, which was our first product. It didn't just happen overnight. There was lots of testing of different components, different amps, different drivers. We didn't just pick the first most expensive ones we could find. It was, here's a few options, let's try them, let's see what works, what doesn't, test the detail, are we happy with that? And eventually we found the right combination of stuff. But it definitely wasn't an overnight thing. It was very many iterations of, this speaker sounds a bit shit. This one, doesn't work at all.
And that was inspired by ATC as well, because...
we've been using ATC forever.
And the ATC mid-driver is seen as the gold standard the world over. The design's changed very little in 30 years, and that's because it doesn't need to. But there are changes in material science that have come along. So if you pick up our mid-driver, I think it's about 600 grams.
200.
You pick up a ATC mid-driver and it's 9 kilos, because there's a huge ferrite magnet on the back that's actually bigger than the flange that holds to the dome, so the whole thing has to go in the cabinet backwards, whereas ours use neodymium magnets. But it was when we found the Bluesma drivers and we A/B'd them with so we've got a pair of very early Quested monitors that have the ATC mid-driver and the Audax tweeter they were all using at the time, and that's what we'd gotten used to in terms of detail. getting the bass end right was really difficult. So I thought, right, okay, let's go back to caveman basics. I'm going to use the Quested for the low end because I know that and I trust it. And then I'm just going to try different combinations of mid-driver and tweeter in place of the ones that are in that. As soon as we found the Blisma ones, it was like I'd taken the original mid-drivers from those tweeters and just sent them off, and they'd been fully refurbished, given an injection of steroids, and then come back again. It was like, it was literally an oh my god moment, and we knew then it was like, it's Blisma mids and tweeters.
What was interesting then after that point, after finding the right complement of drivers which almost form the sound of the speaker, despite being quite transparent, was finding the voicing of the speaker. And that's really difficult because you want to find something that's relatively flat, but flat isn't always good. Flat can be boring, it can sound a bit harsh in places. And so, as I said earlier, I did a lot of the computer stuff, and as we run DSP, it was me dialing in the DSP and then asking Mark, what do you think of this? Do you think this sounds right? So that was a team effort. But I don't know about you, but my personal opinion when we first started was I was trying to match the tonality of the ATCs, because that's what I've been working on for the last 10 years. I know that sound and I trust it. And I was like, right, this is my target. This is what I need to get. But then when we got to that, it was like, right, we've got a good starting place. Now I need to carve our own sound. Now we have our own present day production.
It was getting
voicing.
the best out of the drive. I mean, I was starting on an analog crossover because you put DSP in front of me and I'm like, oh, that's nice, go away.
No, numbers.
And I literally had a 3-channel DBX crossover. And I'm turning knobs like you would with a mix to get the balance between the bass driver and the mid and the tweeter. And I'd spend like half a day just tweaking little things like that. And then when it sounded incredible, when the speakers disappeared and the phantom center was spot on and the balance was great, then I'd call you in and I'd go, right, get your DSP bonce out and make it sound like that, and then you'd sort of measure what I'd done in the analog domain. So it doesn't. So a lot of DSP sounds a bit processy, doesn't it, in a lot of speakers still, and that's because there's a lot of cheap DSP out there. It's the cheapest way now to make a speaker, and
cover shit components.
Exactly. Yeah. But ours sounds very. Again, it disappears. You don't hear DSP, you just hear.
I mean, to be fair, the components that are in it are pretty top end. So you've got like analog devices DSP, there's AKM conversion, so it's stuff that you'd typically find in.
It's just like fine tune. It sounds to me like what you're really doing is just making sure that you can fine tune it to any environment.
Yeah, I mean, what you want with a speaker really within design is something that is a good starting point that on its own, as a standalone speaker outside of any room, is a good sound. And then when you put it into a room, hopefully that translates into the different places you put them in. I think almost any room you put a speaker into will need some kind of treatment or calibration or tweaking, because every room has its own problems. You'll never find a perfect room unless you go into an anechoic chamber. And so once you've got that good starting point, it does make it a lot easier when you put them into a new room like someone's bedroom studio or a room like this. You can then tweak knowing that your starting point is a good foothold to jump off of, you know. I think it's impossible to make a perfect speaker, especially when you put them into a room. You can get a good starting point.
A lot of the thing you could do with the DSP that I couldn't do with my analog fiddlings is phase correction.
Yes.
So by default, and again, it's going back to the source and getting it right. Same with the recording. If you're recording a crap singer, you're going to get a great recording of a crap singer. No one wants that. It's much better to have a bad recording of a really good singer. So it's going back to the source. And all our drivers are designed to go in a flat baffle. So with some designs, you see the tweeter might be set back a bit, or the mid drivers, and that's to sort of time align the drivers in the cabinet. Our drivers are time aligned perfectly on a flat baffle, because that's where the manufacturers decide to make them. But as soon as you add a crossover to that, which you have to in a 3-way speaker, then you get phase problems, and that's where you come in with the DSP.
Now, as I said, I don't really know much about kind of the physical world. I basically just exist in a computer. But
you're AI, you're not even real.
I'm AI. In DSP world, at least, when you add let's say a second order Linkwitz-Riley filter, which is like a 24 dB per octave filter. When you do that, you flip the phase of that by 180 degrees. So every time you're making these corrections, you're flipping the phase of your speaker, and before you know it, you've got like 8 wraparounds and it just sounds phasey and horrible. So that was also a big part of the learning experience for us, was working out how to combat that, how to kind of get in a good starting position, because as I said, we are relatively new to this whole speaker design thing. Obviously, we know how speakers work and we know what a good speaker should sound like, but the whole development process was new to us. And so it was finding the right way to do things. Because when we first started, it was find the frequency response and try and level that out. And then something was still wrong, and it turned out it was the phase thing. And so we were trying to correct that. But as you correct the phase, obviously things then coming back into phase are then way too loud, and then it goes all over the place. So it was refining that stepping sequence to get to a good point. And now we start with phase correction, because as you said, everything's in a flat baffle. They're in phase with each other, but obviously no one sits with a speaker there. You're a meter away, you're 2 meters away. So you find the ideal place, which for us is about 1.5 meters. That's where we measure from. And then you phase align everything to be in line at that point. Because if your speakers are all moving in and out at the same point on the baffle, by the time it reaches 1.5 meters away, because you've got different wavelengths, they will be out of phase. So you calibrate them to be in phase at your kind of golden listening point, and then you can start tweaking the tonality. That was really nerdy, wasn't it?
I mean, the thing is, it's like, what's clear to me is that, you know, as part of that's part of the support element.
Sure. Yeah.
You can do remotely, but also, like, what happens in a scenario where there's maybe a mechanical failure? How would you support your customer in Sweden if something happened in that way?
They get a replacement as straight away, because if a speaker doesn't work, you haven't got a speaker. So that was something we were very conscious of from the beginning. We've had one amp failure. Having said we've had no warranty issues, this wasn't technically a warranty issue. The guy hadn't used the mains cables we'd shipped with the speaker. He'd used a 13 amp instead of a 10 amp. He had a huge power surge. He said the power went on and off for ages, and then he had a huge power surge come into his house that took a load of electronics out, and it took one of our amps out in one of the speakers. We just replaced it the next day, and it had blown an internal fuse, so that was actually fixable, and then we could swap it again. But the priority number one is get that speaker working tomorrow or today if we can, and we did. We just swapped the amp out. And so that's kind of our philosophy on that. There's no return it, and you know, we'll worst case scenario, if you're in Yorkshire and you've got a session today and you phone up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go, one of my speakers isn't working, we'll just turn up with a pair of speakers and get you up and running. And but the reliability has been astounding. So in the case of that one that went wrong, technically we could have said, well, that's your fault. You've put the wrong mains cable on it. You've had a power surge. You should really be using some sort of surge protector on expensive studio equipment. But that's not good customer service as far as I'm concerned. I just want to get the guy up and running and make sure he's all right and happy, and then, you know, he's going to tell everyone that. And not, I got terrible customer service from them, and my speaker still doesn't work, and it's been off for repair for 6 months. And
that's, again, that kind of speaks to the whole community vibe. You're rather than, these aren't just your customers, these are your friends, really. These are your colleagues.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They're working in the same field. You're working in a very niche industry as it is, and you understand their pain points, and you're addressing all of those pain points, and at the same time, like, not only through the hardware, but also through the service and the attitude towards supporting them.
Yeah. So the next thing we've got to work on, the next step for us is lead times, isn't it? Because and that's where I feel we've been letting people down at the moment, and it's really because we're naive with manufacturing. We're new to this, and there are so many unexpected things that you could never imagine would happen that come along and just stop you in your tracks. We had towards the end of last year, we tried to get ahead of everything. So I think we needed 18 bass drivers. So they were taking 3 months to come through. So I ordered 60. We were getting ahead on mid drivers, tweeters, amplifiers. The metalwork, we were going to do a production run of 12 pairs of Mum 6s with the plate amp. We need to get the custom metalwork made for the plate amp. I ordered 60 instead of 12. So we were getting ahead on stock. Went to order the IEC mains inlet, discontinued. Manufacturer's no longer making it anymore. I could not find one the same size as that thing. So that means we've got to scrap all the metalwork, redesign everything because of this one stupid component. Now, in the end, I did find a supplier that had, I think, 400 of them in stock. So I just went, right, give me the lot. I'll have all of them. That then cocks up your cash flow because you've ordered 400 IEC mains inlets instead of the 24 that you need, but it's solved that, we haven't got to scrap them. That's cheaper than scrapping the metalwork. And so there's so many things that, I think with packaging for the Mum 6 just went wrong so many times. And it's like, no, things like that. That you just don't expect.
And what about there's a sustainability element to this as well about the boxes?
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
So during the early development phase of our speakers, we're talking about right at the beginning here, we were using MDF to test and experiment because it's very cheap as well to work with. You're talking about 30 quid a sheet, and you can get a pair of speakers out of that. We were using that as our material. It's the industry standard, unless you're going for like a more expensive plywood, which I know the ATC subs over there use. And it's great. It sounds fine. It's a tried and tested material for developing speakers, but the problem was finishing. So during the initial prototype stage, we were painting speakers. As you can imagine, painting them yourself without a proper spray shop and all that kind of stuff, they just looked a bit shit. I'm not going to lie. They looked a bit awful. And we were thinking, right, we cannot ship speakers looking like this. They look amateur. So the next step was, right, let's try and find a spray shop. And so we did loads of research, and it ended up being in the region of around £1,000 a pair to paint. And I'm like, right, there's all our profit gone. This is a complete waste of time. And so we thought, right, there has to be a better way of doing this. Obviously, painting as well is hugely ecologically damaging. Let's just find a better way. And so we did loads and loads of research, and we found a unique material called Valchromat, which is a high density fiberboard. So it's like MDF on steroids, basically. It's more dense, about 30% more dense. It's already coloured when you buy the raw material. So it's coloured the whole way through. There's no like shitty green fluffy middle bit that you often get with like moisture resistant MDF. And that solved a hell of a lot of problems for us. So with Valchromat, it's a lot easier to machine. So we're wasting less material because you're not getting bits of fluff flying off all over the place. You're just getting a good cut. It works every time. In terms of colouring, as I said, you can get the material in colours as a raw material. So we have something like 11 colours available for our monitors. And it's just a case of, right, this person needs a yellow pair of speakers. Let's buy some yellow Valchromat. You don't have to mess around with painting or any of that environmentally damaging nonsense. So once you've basically built the speaker, you end up with the speaker in its raw material colour. And then we add a linseed oil-based oil or kind of finish to it. And that just brings out the vibrancy of the colour and also protects it from moisture and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got a speaker that's got a higher quality finish that didn't cost us $1,000 to paint. Okay, the material is more expensive. It's about £200 a sheet rather than 30, but the amount of time we're saving as well through not having to do 87 layers of paint and then sand it, paint it, sand it, etc. You just get that material, you cut it, you oil it, and you're done. It's like a 10-minute job.
How does it sound? Does it improve the...
It's better.
Yes, because it's a more inert material, you're not getting a resonating body, you're not resonating the cabinet. So if you tap the top of one of our cabinets, it sounds like you're tapping rock. There's just nothing. It doesn't vibrate, it doesn't resonate at all. And that's exactly what you want for a speaker. When you listen to a speaker, you don't want to hear the box in terms of unwanted resonances. Okay, the sound of a speaker is largely formed in the bass end of the volume of air within that box, but you don't want to hear the material too much. You just want to hear what the speaker itself is producing. So Valchromat solved a lot of problems for us. It's environmentally friendly, it's easier to work with. Yeah, it's a bit more expensive, but we're saving a fortune on not having to paint them. And it just means that the customer gets a much higher quality speaker. It looks the part now, rather than, a foam roller paint job that frankly looked horrendous. This is a real high quality finish.
That was the only part of the process for me that was really painful. really painful. And I was stuck in that middle room there, and I tried all sorts of different paint finishes, all sorts of different paint. I'm speaking to people that have done this for years, and got 3 quotes in from, and I'm finding that I'm having to paint the cabinets and then sand it and then paint it and then sand it and then paint it. And then each cabinet was taking a week, wasn't it? Because you have to paint it, wait for it to dry. Yeah. And I got 3 quotes from local companies, and they all said £1,000 a pair. And I was like, why is it £1,000 a pair? And they're like, you've got to paint it and sand it and paint it and sand it and paint. And you got to, there's at least 9 iterations of that. You got to wait for it to dry. It's going to take us 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. And we'd the first painted sort of customer version we came up with, I'd done 10 pairs, and they were all in the studio drying, because that room's super insulated. It's like it's super insulated. So I just put this, and this was in the winter, I think, wasn't it? So I just left the heater on in there overnight, and with all the cabinets drying overnight. You'd go in the studio in the morning, and the just smell of paint had sunk into the acoustic treatment. It was awful, and I just looked at them on all lined up on planks of wood on the floor, and I just looked at them and just went, that's really shit. And they all went in a skip, and we emailed all the customers, and it was like, right, we need to find a better way to do this. And then that's when we found the Velcro out. It was like, okay, this might work. And it did. That changed. And
on top of that, it creates a unique look for the speakers.
Yeah.
Because the material itself looks different from MDF or just kind of veneered wood or anything. It is a very unique texture to that speaker, especially if you have like our light grey speakers, which remain in their kind of raw form. You can see the speckling of the material and that kind of thing. It looks like concrete. So it's quite a unique look. And that's just another thing to the identity of our product.
What do you guys would you say has been like the steepest learning curve throughout this process?
All of it.
Yeah,
absolutely all of it. Yeah. The whole thing has been difficult.
So making a speaker is basically all you're doing is you're juggling a load of compromises, and that's the hardest bit. It's like, right, okay, the first thing was the compromise of the loading of the bass driver. So you can have a sealed enclosure, you can have a ported design, you can have a transmission line,
passive radiator.
Yeah, there's lots of other options as well, but and the passive radiator, they're kind of the main ones. The downside of a ported enclosure is that it's a tuned resonant system, so it's tuned to a particular frequency. It takes a certain volume of air in the port to activate that sort of engineering aspect of it. So at low volumes you lose all your bass, and when you've turned the speaker up enough to get enough air moving through the port, your bass response below the tuning of the port just falls off a cliff. With transmission line, they're very difficult to design, very expensive to manufacture, and the cabinets are enormous, so we kind of ruled that one out. And the downside with a sealed enclosure, you get a volume of air behind the driver that's specifically tailored to the mechanical characteristics of the driver that basically acts as a perfect spring. So instead of using the reason, let's go back a bit. The reason you have a cabinet is because if you have a 8-inch bass driver, any frequency that's the wavelength of which is longer than the width of the driver, which is most of them, if you're crossing over at 500 hertz, like ours are, you'll get in-phase signal coming off the front of the cone and perfectly out-of-phase signal coming off the back of the cone. That any frequency that's longer than the diameter of the driver will wrap around and completely cancel out. And that's why if you hold a bass driver in free air, you can see it going mental and you can't hear anything. And it's because so you've got to do something with the energy coming off the back of the cone. With a sealed enclosure, you want to get rid of it. With a ported enclosure, you want to use it to go round into the tuning system to emphasize the bass. Kind of the same with the transmission line, but it's a different principle. And with the passive radiator, it's like a ported system, but instead of having a port with airflow in it, you're having passive cones that are tuned to emphasize the bass end again. The most accurate one for studio use really is a sealed enclosure, because you're just getting rid of that out of phase energy. But the downside of that is you're losing a huge amount of efficiency. So you're only getting 50% of the output of the driver that you would be if you used a ported or a transmission line. But what solved that was the engineering of the purified driver. The 8-inch driver's got a 30mm excursion, which is is bonkers. That you'd expect that from a sort of 15-inch PA sub.
I mean, the typical excursion of a driver that size is about 6 millimeters.
Yeah.
So you're getting 5 times the ability to move.
And the power from the Hypex amps as well, which is just super clean power. That's all it is. It's so that solved the efficiency problem. We can get that extra power out of the bass driver to sort of stand up to a ported system without all the compromises of that. So that was the first compromise that had to be juggled. And then obviously you've got to put the bass driver in a cabinet. That causes problems with internal resonances, edge diffraction, all kinds of other stuff. So you've got to juggle those. There's 2 reasons why the mid driver and the tweeter are offset. One is so as you can turn you can put the tweeter in a blanking plate and you can use the speaker on its side. If you want to put it on a console meter bridge, you can use them horizontally. But the other reason is because you get edge diffraction, which can interfere with your stereo imaging. And offsetting the drivers mathematically minimises that because it's unequal on each edge of the cabinet, so that makes your stereo imaging better. So it's just juggling a lot of stuff like that, and it was finding out. That was the biggest learning curve. It was like, okay, let's list all the compromises. How do some we can eliminate, but then it emphasises that one. What's the best balance between all the horrible things that you have to contend with when you're putting a driver in a box. Naively, we thought the great starting point would be get the best components we can and put them in a box. No, it's much
maybe
more
not.
It's much more complicated than that.
What about now moving on to, obviously you've got a whole speaker line, but what I'm hearing and what I know is that you got a load of experience just around mixing. Some of the other products that you might be able to, think about, is that what you're thinking about further down in the line in terms of your roadmap, or are you fixed on speakers at this moment in time?
I think the most important thing is to concentrate on the speakers at the moment. I see a world in the future where we can work with another manufacturer on a more budget-friendly module, so largely based on our design and our kind of thinking, but where the manufacturing can be outsourced to a company that have experience of building a product to a price. But the quality's got to be up there. Otherwise, there's no point, because there's so many manufacturers with £500 pairs of speakers out there at the moment. You've got to do something really different to compete with those, and I think we can probably do that. I'm not really, now I've gone into Atmos world, I'm not really into anything else. There's a lot of, there was a huge gap in the market for a dedicated Atmos audio interface. Audient have stepped in and absolutely nailed it at a really good price. So there's no point in us thinking of doing anything like that at all. There's a lot of companies out there making hardware, which is, let's be honest, counterfeit hardware. Another 1176 clone. Great, just what the world needs. Not interested in that at all. You want to make a mixing console, but that's just ridiculous.
We need like £2 million to invest.
That'd be a vanity project.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, actually.
So I have an idea in my head for a particular mixing desk design, which would work really well for Dolby Atmos and all the kind of stuff that our speakers were intended to be used in. But just at our current stage of business, we don't have the money or what I assume we would need to develop our own system. I guess it would be like £1 million-ish, but I don't know. This is something I'm researching, but really it's a very bottom of the to-do list thing at the moment.
And it would be quite a niche product. But I think there is actually a gap in the market for that. So our basic idea is you can have an analog console, or you can have a control surface, or you can have any combination of that. What we are heavily inspired by, which a lot of people in studio land aren't, is live world. And the live, as you know, the live sound world and the event sound world is 10 years ahead of what everyone's doing in the studio. And that's why we called the channel originally PresentDayProduction, because it was like, can we just drag recording out of the 70s, please, and just, and that's why we've embraced Atmos so thoroughly. I'm hearing incredible mixes in that room that sound like they were recorded last week, and that's because they were, not oh, we've got to make that sound like the 70s, or we've got to make that sound like the 80s, or we've got to just stop doing that. Just, oh, okay, that's appropriate for certain genres and certain things, but, why does all metal music have to be crushed to, why does it just look like a sausage why does that and it has, and now they're finding you can't do that with Atmos because you haven't got a mix bus, so you can't put an SSL bus compressor on the mix bus because there isn't one. So they're finding all these little workarounds. So it's, we found a way to crush the hell out of it, and I'm like, stop doing that. God. So Atmos is really kind of moving that on, and that's the direction we're going in. And I think the whole immersive audio thing will really take off when it's fully embraced by live world and event. I mean, you look at something like the Sphere in Vegas, the audio system in that place is unbelievable. There's different, in terms of beam firing PA, there's a German block, a Spanish block, a French block, and if you're sitting in the German block, you hear the production in German, and if you move 3 seats away into the Chinese block, you're hearing it in Chinese, and you're not hearing any German at all. That is what we need to be doing in Studio World, and we need to be constantly inspired by Studio World. There aren't guys anymore on big gigs that are taking around huge analog Midas consoles with 8-7-foot racks of equipment. They're just not doing that. They're using a digital desk that sounds a hell of a lot better than their rack of shit did. It doesn't break down. There's not £800,000 worth of copper going from the front of house to the stage. It's all going down 2 Cat6 cables. And that, I think, there are people embracing that in Studio World, but there are so many people that are just stuck in, okay, we want to get into Atmos, but it's very difficult to patch in analog gear. So we're going to stick with stereo. It's like, well, okay, but we don't think like that. We think Atmos is, stereo's rubbish. A lot of people will disagree with me on that. Stereo is rubbish. Everyone says, two ears, 2 speakers. That is not how your ears work at all. If you're saying 2 ears, 2 speakers, that means you've never heard anything behind you. Stereo is just a ridiculous way to convey audio. It's just stupid. And it took me a long time to get that. And when Atmos first started to move into the musical world, I pushed back like, not another surround format. This is gonna fail. And it was the day when I heard an Amazon talking bean can in my mate's stone kitchen in his old farmhouse, and walked around with a tea towel tied around my head and couldn't tell where the sound was coming from, and then heard the sound coming out the speakers on your laptop. That's the moment I went, so you don't need 16 speakers around your living room. Oh, and then the binaural playback is improving all the time. It's decoded on your device in real time. So as the technology improves, the mixes improve. It's not, you don't upload a static mix to the streaming services. That's decoded on your device. So as those algorithms improve, so does your experience. And I think it's really going to take off when things like the Sphere start appearing in other cities around the world, which apparently there was going to be one in London, but now there isn't for ridiculous reasons. I think light pollution was the main, because there's obviously no light pollution in London at all at the moment. So, but yeah, as venues like that start to appear around the world, and it will be led by countries like Dubai, and who will have truly immersive experiences, and then that will filter down into the sort of domestic environment, and then there won't be a need for counterfeit 1176s or Paultec equalizers anymore. Maybe, I don't know, but I think it will come from that world. It won't come from Studio World because it's too stuck in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was speaking off camera. I'm seeing a lot of these silos breaking down, whereby, when we're talking about production, I was recently in Frankfurt and saw a company called Pixel Hue. Now, they do these consoles for live production, and they're taking on some of the big boys, the Barcodes and stuff, and they're able to do so much for, significantly less money. And their consoles, what you can do with them, like how you can kind of control both the lighting, the video element, the audio element. You've got ST2110 on there. You've got Dante, 64 channels of Dante on there. It's amalgamating everything into smaller and smaller pieces, so that you have one guy that's being able to control the production side. No longer do you need these bigger teams, and things like being able to do that through remote production, through all these different new technologies, hybrid workflows that are coming in. Everything is changing, and everything is coming onto the network. So, I think what you're saying is exactly right. It does need people that are influential to come out and try to, I suppose, articulate it in a way so that people understand where we can go with this technology. And I think a lot of the times that, I think maybe, it's nostalgia, maybe it's, people, the reason why people like seeing all this rack mount, all this kind of outboard gear, is because it looks cool.
They're used to it.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it I'd love a pull tech, but yeah, it looks cool. But am I going to really use it? I can use a plugin and it works as well, really.
Yeah.
From majority of things that I need it for. And I just think that generally, more people like yourself that are that have the heritage, but are also more forward thinking, and about how to adopt this technology and bring it up to the 21st century.
And it's how we get it out to so again, the consumer playback systems for Atmos already are great, but it's still not as good as the full speaker experience in there. But so it's getting people in front of that as well. And because every single person, every artist we've mixed a track for that has come into this room, there have been ones that have had to leave halfway through playing back the song because they need to go and blow their nose and wipe their eyes. Literally people in floods of tears who've had to have a break for 20 minutes and then come back in and sit down and go, right, okay, carry on. With it, there's been so many people cry in that room, and I've never had that in stereo. Well, it might have been because I've done a really shit mix, but not with just completely overwhelmed with pure emotion. And that's another thing that really sold it for us as well, isn't it? It was like, okay, this is.
It makes this good. Morning. I was listening. It makes a massive difference. It's like it's almost like you are listening. I wouldn't say right now you're listening to the real thing, but I would say it's as good as the second option. It's as good as you can get at the moment, and I don't think we're far off. Maybe 5 more years, and we're going to be in the situation that you won't be able to tell the difference between a whole orchestra and something that's been properly recorded and mixed in Atmos.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are producing music now with the intention of doing a mix in Atmos, including us. And it's starting off with things like a jazz piano trio, which you'd think would be the most unlikely candidate for an Atmos mix. But you can do lots of things with it. So there's you can have the band on a stage in a jazz club and you're watching them and you've got the ambience of the room behind you. But you can also put the piano there and the drums there and the bass there and have most of it behind you. And you can turn round when there's a piano solo and listen, and then go. That was a drum solo. Now turn around the other way, and it works, doesn't it? It's just like you're in the middle of 3 musicians, and tiny little details like being able to pan the overheads on the drum kit, being able to pan those up 10 degrees, and then you can hear the difference in height between the snare and the ride cymbal.
But don't you also think that it also adds an element of creativity to the mix engineer?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like 100%. It's taking the mix engineer and having being a part of the creative process.
100%. So you're no longer confined to just being able to pan left and right and maybe back a bit by adding pre-delay and that kind of thing. You can physically envelop the listener in the backing vocals, have them there, have some weird sci-fi synthy sound effect things going on in the ceiling. And it doesn't have to be over the top, because if you've got Michael Jackson spinning around your head, that's just annoying. Yeah. But you can do it tastefully, and you can up the immersion massively. It's immersive audio, that's what it is. You can up the immersion by widening everything around the listener, and up the emotion, which is always the end goal, really, I think. So it does depend heavily on which genres you're working in as well. So, for example, you said jazz, we might have left, centre, right are the musicians, and then you'll just have ambience like reverbs, delays, that kind of thing everywhere else in the surrounds, in the ceiling speakers. Whereas with K-pop, which is a really big up and coming thing in Dolby Atmos, And I swear to God, I have not heard a bad K-pop mix.
There's some incredible
They are
mixes.
incredible engineers doing this stuff, and they're just being really creative with it. So you might have like vocal in the center, you might have acoustic guitar in the left and right sounding like it's inside your head, some backing vocals there. There's a drum fill that might spin around you, but it just sounds good. It's done tastefully. It's not over the top. It's not cheesy.
If you're putting something through a phaser, like a whole drum fill or something to get there,
He said not cheesy K-pop.
then make that move around at the, or put the whole song through it and just make the whole song go just for a bar or something, or to reposition something. If you've got a male singer and a female singer, move the female singer when the creative options are.
And also in
are
like
endless.
English or American pop. So there's one song we played you in there, which was Believer by Imagine Dragons. As the first chorus is about to come in, you've got most of the song kind of here. There's some backing vocals in the rear. As the chorus is just about to come in, everything zooms past you from the rear towards the front. And it's like, wow, there's this massive blast of energy. And it wakes you up. It's like, damn, that was cool.
Yeah, and that's, again, it's about being tasteful. The gold standard Atmos mix is not particularly for Sonics, but just because of when it was recorded. But in terms of just a brilliant Atmos mix, is Elton John's Rocket Man, and that's
the
a
Atmos
very
song.
very good introduction to Atmos. And the reason for that is it was Greg Penny that remixed it over 10 years ago now. It's
about 2013, I think.
And it was one of the first songs mixed in Atmos. I think Steve Jenowick did an REM album slightly before that, but it was one of the first sort of big hits to be released in Atmos. And it starts off with Elton John singing in between your two speakers, your Phantom Center, and the pianos you can hear coming out the left and right. And for the first minute, it's like, what's all the fuss about? And then the backing vocals come in and just cuddle you from every direction. And then the acoustic guitars come in and they're outside the speakers. And then the electric guitars come in that go over your head. And then the whole chorus comes in, and that's the bit where everyone cries. And you look at people's hairs on their arms, and they're just up like that. And that's a really good example of an Atmos mix, because there isn't stuff spinning around your head all the time. It starts off very much at the front and then sort of expands out into the room. But we haven't found a genre it doesn't work in.
Not really.
So anything from solo guitarist, we've had a solo guitarist in, and it works for that, because you can just be in the room with the guitarist, and as long as you forget about speakers. So don't think, I'll put the guitar in the left speaker or the right speaker. You just have to think about positional, the sphere of audio. Where do I want to put this? Like I did with the B, which was great fun.
So just to round up everything now, just what shall I round it off?
What's your favourite chocolate bar? That's always a good one.
What I was actually going to say is I can imagine that being used like this, the Atmos stuff with electronic music significantly.
Oh, it's very cool.
That would really, and also that to be done live as well.
Yeah.
Like to be able to do that and then play that in the club with an Atmos system. That would be fun.
And again, a lot of the detractors say, it doesn't work for live world because it's reliant on one member of the audience standing in the middle of the... But when was the last time you went to Wembley and you got stuck in front of the left line array? That doesn't work either, does it? So it can work. And with stuff like beamforming, and again, what they're doing in venues like the Sphere, it can absolutely work.
Definitely. So I just want to round it up. Where would people find more information about what you guys are doing?
So we have a website, PresentDayProduction.com. So that's all the information on speakers and just anything that we're currently working on. We have a YouTube channel, so it's youtube.com/PresentDayProduction. And that's everything from updates on speakers to also our general content that we make as well, reviews, news about music, that kind of stuff. Those would be the main two ways.
Lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me down.
Thank
it was
you.
a pleasure
Thank you.
seeing everything. And I really hope all the best for the future with your speakers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Great.